How painful could the first thing a person learns about their father be? The first thing Elizabeth learned about her father was that he was a coward who abandoned them. The second was that he was selfish. The third was that he never loved them. Her mother told her this before she could form her own memories. For 45 years, Elizabeth hated a man she had never met, a ghost created by her mother through carefully chosen words and strategic silences. And then in 1987, that ghost appeared at her door with his new wife wanting to explain. This is the true story of how abandonment becomes inheritance, how a woman's pain transforms into her daughter's poison, and how hatred is passed down through generations like family recipes, painful and impossible to forget. You will listen to this story with anguish. I'm certain you will make Elizabeth's pain your own and experience it yourself. Let's get to the story. You can imagine what Southampton was like in early 1942. American troops were coming to England, thousands of them, preparing for a war that would eventually take them to France, to Germany, to places most of these farm boys and factory workers couldn't even imagine. Margaret Harper, everyone called her Maggie, was 22 years old, working at a cafe near the port where American soldiers came to drink tea and feel normal life. The war had been going on non-stop for 2 years. Her brother was somewhere in North Africa. Her father had died in the Blitz. Life had become a series of sirens, ration books, and waiting for bad news. William Carter walked into her cafe on a cold February morning. From a small town in Pennsylvania, 24 years old, dark-haired, with an easy smile that reminded Maggie of movies, of life beyond blackout curtains and bomb shelters. "Coffee, please," he said. "Though I hear you Brits can't make coffee very well." "We make tea properly," Maggie replied. "Which is what matters," Bill grinned. "Fair enough. Tea it is then, but I'm warning you, I'm going to judge your entire country by this one cup of tea. No pressure then." This was the beginning, just a soldier flirting with a waitress, the oldest story in the world. But for Maggie, there was something different about Bill. He kept coming back. Every day for a week, then 2 weeks, then a month. He'd sit at the counter and talk to her between orders, telling her about Pennsylvania, about his family's dairy farm, about how he'd never left his own state before enlisting. "What are you going to do after the war?" Maggie asked one afternoon when the cafe was quiet. "Go home," Bill said immediately. "Take over the farm from my dad. Maybe build that big barn he's always talking about. Live a boring, peaceful life." That sounds nice. Boring and peaceful. What about you? Maggie shrugged. "Survive, I guess. That's all any of us are trying to do right now." Bill reached across the counter and took her hand. "You're going to do more than survive. I can tell. You're the kind of person who builds things even after everything's been torn down." It was the first kind thing anyone had said to Maggie in months. She started crying right there at the counter, and Bill came around and held her while she cried into his uniform. Over the next 4 months, Maggie and Bill fell in love. Or at least Maggie fell in love. Bill said he did too, and she believed him at the time. They spent every free moment together. Bill would finish training exercises and come straight to the cafe. When Maggie's shift ended, they'd walk around Southampton talking about everything and nothing. Sometimes they'd go to the cinema. Sometimes they'd just sit in the park holding hands, pretending the war didn't exist. In April, Bill got a weekend pass. They took a train out to the countryside, away from the city, away from uniforms and air raid sirens. They stayed at a small inn that didn't ask too many questions. That weekend, lying in a narrow bed in Bill's arms, Maggie felt something she hadn't felt since before the war started. Hope. Hope that she might actually have a future. Hope that love still existed, despite everything trying to destroy it. "When the war's over," Bill said, "come to America with me. Marry me. Let's live that boring, peaceful life on the farm." "You're not serious," Maggie said, but her heart was about to burst with joy. "I'm completely serious. I love you, Maggie. I want to spend my life with you. We barely know each other. It's only been 4 months. 4 months in wartime is a lifetime. I know everything I need to know. You're brave, you're kind, and you make terrible coffee but great tea. What else is there?" Maggie laughed and cried at the same time. "Okay, yes, after the war I'll come to America. We'll get married and live on your farm and be boring and peaceful." They made love that night with new urgency, as if they were making a promise, as if they could lock down a future that felt increasingly uncertain. At the end of May, Bill came to the cafe with news that turned Maggie's world into a nightmare. The ship's leaving. 2 weeks. They're not saying where, but everyone knows it's eventually France. We're going to invade, push the Germans back. Maggie felt her stomach drop. She'd known this was coming. All the American troops were here to prepare for the invasion. But knowing and living it were different things. 2 weeks, she repeated. Yes. Listen, Maggie, I'm serious about America. I'm going to write to my family, tell them about you, and when this is over, I'm coming back for you. I promise. Don't promise, Maggie said. Don't make promises you can't keep. I will keep it, Bill said firmly. I love you. This love doesn't just disappear because of a war. They spent Bill's last night in Southampton together, in Maggie's small room above the cafe. Her mother wasn't happy about it, but it was wartime and people made allowances for soldiers who might not come home. They didn't sleep much. They talked, made love, and talked more, trying to fit a lifetime into hours. I'll write to you every week, Bill promised. Every week. And you'll write back and tell me about the terrible customers at the cafe and your awful English weather. I'll write, Maggie promised. And when I get back, Bill paused, pulling her close. When I get back, we're getting married right away. I'm not waiting. I'm not risking losing you. You won't lose me. Promise me, Bill said. Promise you'll wait for me. I promise. They never left each other's side until dawn. Then Bill got dressed in his uniform, kissed her one more time and left. Maggie watched from the window as he walked down the street toward the base. He turned once, waved, showed that easy smile. Then he was gone. For the first month, letters came regularly. Bill wrote about the crossing to France, about his unit, about how he constantly missed her. The letters were censored. He couldn't say exactly where he was or what he was doing. But his love came through clearly. Maggie wrote back religiously. She told him about the cafe, about her mother's improving health, about planning their future. In every letter, she told him she loved him. In August, the letters stopped. At first, Maggie wasn't too worried. Mail was unreliable in wartime. Letters got lost, delayed, rerouted. She kept writing, kept sending letters to the address Bill had given her. But as weeks passed with no news, worry turned to fear. Was he wounded? Had he been captured? Was he dead? In September, Maggie realized she was pregnant. She sat in her room, staring at her hands, doing the math over and over. 2 months along, maybe more. She'd gotten pregnant during one of those last nights together. Or maybe that April weekend. She was pregnant, unmarried, and the father was missing somewhere in France with no way to contact him. The first thing she felt was panic. Unwed mothers were a scandal in 1942. They were whispered about, shamed. Sometimes their babies were taken away and given to proper families or sent to homes. The second thing she felt was hope. Bill loved her. He'd promised to come back, to marry her. This baby wasn't a disaster. It was their future arriving early. When Bill came home, they'd get married right away. Everything would work out. She just needed to find him. Maggie went to the American base where Bill had been stationed. The officers there were polite but unhelpful. William Carter, we can't give out information about individual soldiers, ma'am. For security reasons. I'm his fiancée, Maggie lied. Please, I just need to know if he's alive. If you were his fiancée, you'd be listed as next of kin. Are you listed as next of kin? No, but I am his fiancée. Then we can't help you. I'm sorry. Maggie tried writing to Bill's family in Pennsylvania. She sent a letter explaining who she was, about the baby, asking if they'd heard from Bill, requesting they tell him to contact her urgently. The letter came back 6 weeks later, unopened. Stamped return to sender, no such address. The address Bill had given her was wrong, or fake, or something much worse. Maggie told herself it was a mistake. Bill had just remembered the address wrong, or she'd written it down wrong. He wouldn't have lied to her. He couldn't have. By November, Maggie was 5 months pregnant and showing. She couldn't hide it anymore. Her mother found out and was beside herself with anger. Who's the father? Mrs. Harper demanded. An American soldier. Bill Carter. He's in France. We're getting married when he comes back. When he comes back, her mother repeated bitterly. Maggie, he's not coming back for you. These American boys, they say whatever they need to say to get what they want, then they disappear. Bill's not like that. He loves me. Then where is he? Why hasn't he written? Why did the letters stop? The mail's unreliable. The mail's not that unreliable. He's gone, Maggie. He got what he wanted and left. And now you're pregnant, alone, and everyone in this town is going to know it. Maggie wanted to argue but couldn't, because deep down, somewhere inside, she was starting to believe her mother might be right. Elizabeth Carter was born on November 28, 1942. Maggie labored for 18 hours in a small hospital room, her mother the only person by her side. No husband, no fiancé. Just a girl who'd believed a soldier's words. When the nurse asked for the father's name for the birth certificate, Maggie said, "William Carter, American, missing in action." "Your husband?" "No." The nurse's expression said everything. Maggie had seen that look before, a mixture of pity and judgment, sympathy and superiority, the look that said you should have known better. But when they placed Elizabeth in Maggie's arms, none of that mattered. She looked at her daughter's face, Bill's dark hair, Bill's nose, Maggie's mouth, and felt something fierce and protective bloom in her chest. "Hello, Elizabeth," she whispered. "I'm your mother, and I promise I'll take care of you. I promise you'll never need him." Raising Elizabeth alone in wartime England was brutal. Maggie went back to work when Liz was 3 weeks old, leaving her with Mrs. Harper during shifts. Money was tight, there was barely enough to eat, and everywhere Maggie went, she felt people's judgment. Other mothers whispered, shopkeepers were cold to her, men assumed she was available, that an unwed mother would be grateful for any attention. Maggie learned to develop a feline skill. She learned to ignore the whispers, to give sharp responses to inappropriate men, to keep her head high when people treated her like she'd committed a crime, and she learned to hate Bill. At first, she made excuses for him. Maybe he'd been killed and she just hadn't been notified. Maybe he'd been captured. Maybe he'd written and the letters were lost. But as the war continued and ended in 1945, with no word from Bill, excuses became impossible. If he was alive, he would have found a way to contact her. If he cared, he would have tried. The only logical conclusion was that he didn't care, that he'd lied about everything, that she was just another girl in another port city, a pleasant distraction before shipping out, nothing more. This realization, that she'd meant everything to him when he'd meant nothing to her, transformed her grief into anger. Anger at Bill for lying, anger at herself for believing, anger at a world that punished women for the same actions men got away with. Elizabeth's first full sentence was, "Where's my daddy?" She was 3 years old. Maggie could have said many things. "He's far away. I don't know. We don't talk about him." Instead, she said, "Your daddy left us. He didn't love us enough to stay." Liz's face crumpled. Why? Because some people are selfish. They only think about themselves. But it's okay, because we don't need him. We have each other. This was the first of thousands of similar conversations. As Liz grew up, Maggie carefully, methodically taught her daughter to hate the father she'd never met. Your father was an American soldier who made promises he never kept. Your father left when he found out I was pregnant because he was a coward. Your father never contacted us, never sent money, never cared if we were alive or dead. All of this was technically true. Bill had never contacted them. He'd never sent money. He apparently didn't care. What Maggie didn't say, she didn't know why. She'd never gotten an explanation. She'd never heard his side, but in her anger and pain, she filled the gaps with the worst possible interpretation and fed that interpretation to Liz until it became truth. Elizabeth grew up angry. Angry at the father who'd abandoned her, angry at a world that treated her and her mother as less than other families, angry at everything. She was brilliant, sharp-tongued, defensive. She got into fights at school when other kids talked about their fathers. She refused to participate in Father's Day activities. She told everyone who asked that her father was dead, because that was easier than explaining he was alive, but had chosen not to know her. Maggie watched her daughter's anger with satisfaction and guilt. Satisfaction, because Liz would never make Maggie's mistake, would never trust a man who made promises. Guilt, because she could see how this anger ate away at Liz from the inside. But the guilt wasn't strong enough to make Maggie tell a different story. Because the anger protected them both. It kept them from hoping. It kept them from getting hurt again. In March 1987, a letter arrived at Maggie's house. She was 67 now, retired, living in the small town where she'd spent her entire life. Liz was 44, living in London, working as a lawyer, unmarried, still angry. The return address on the letter was from Pennsylvania. Maggie's hands shook as she opened it. Dear Margaret Harper, I hope this letter reaches you. I've been trying to find you for 45 years. My name is William Carter. We knew each other in Southampton in 1942. I need to explain what happened. You need to know the truth. I'm coming to England next month with my wife. Please, if you're willing, let me meet with you. Let me explain. There are things you don't know. Things I should have told you decades ago. Respectfully, William. Maggie read the letter 3 times. Then she called Liz. He has a wife, Liz said, her voice cold and sharp over the phone. Of course he does. He probably married someone proper in Pennsylvania, while you were raising his daughter alone. Liz, are you going to see him? I don't know. He says he wants to explain. Explain what? How he abandoned you? How he left you pregnant and alone? How he never tried to find us for 45 years? He says he did try to find us, then he didn't try very hard, did he? Liz's voice was edged with the anger Maggie had fed her for 45 years. Don't see him, Mom. Don't give him that satisfaction. Maybe I should hear what he has to say. Why? What could he possibly say to justify what he did? Maggie had no answer. Maggie wrote back. Despite Liz's objections, despite her own better judgment, she wrote back saying yes, Bill could visit. She gave him her address. She told herself she just wanted closure. She wanted to hear him admit he was wrong, that he'd abandoned them, that she'd been right to hate him all these years. But the small, stubborn part of her that she'd been trying to kill wanted to hear that it had all been a misunderstanding, that he'd loved her, that he'd tried to find her, that the story she'd told herself and Liz for 45 years was wrong. Bill Carter arrived on an April afternoon. Maggie watched from the window as a taxi pulled up and an old man got out, followed by a woman around Maggie's age. Bill was 69 now. He'd aged, gained weight, moved with the careful stiffness of someone whose body was beginning to betray him. But Maggie recognized him immediately. The same eyes, the same mouth. Just wrapped in 45 years of living. She opened the door before Bill could knock. They stood there looking at each other. 45 years that could be dismissed easily with just words. Maggie was 22 again, watching him walk down the street toward the base. Bill was 24, promising to come back forever. Hello, Maggie, Bill said. William. The woman beside him stepped forward. I'm Carol, Bill's wife. Thank you for agreeing to see us. Carol had a kind face, a gentle appearance, not the conniving homewrecker Maggie had imagined in her angriest moments. Come in, Maggie said. They sat in Maggie's small living room. Maggie made tea because she didn't know what else to do with her hands. The silence hung heavy with 45 years of unspoken things. You look good, Bill finally said. Don't, Maggie said. Don't make small talk. You said you had an explanation. Explain. Bill took a breath. I was wounded in France. July 1942 artillery shell. I lost my left leg below the knee and most of the hearing in my right ear. Maggie felt something cold settle in her stomach. You were wounded. They sent me back to America, to a military hospital in Virginia. I was there for 8 months, learning to walk again, dealing with infections. It was bad, Maggie. Really bad. They didn't think I'd make it through the first month. You could have written, Maggie said, but her voice was less certain now. I did write. I wrote you dozens of letters from that hospital. Wrote until my hand cramped. I never got a response, so I thought maybe you'd moved on. Or maybe you were angry that I got wounded and couldn't come back right away. I didn't understand. I didn't receive any letters after August 1942. Bill looked devastated. None, not even one? Not even one, Carol spoke quietly. Mail from military hospitals was often rerouted or delayed. Sometimes letters from wounded soldiers were held back, so they wouldn't upset families until the soldier was stable. It was stupid, but it happened. When I got out of the hospital, I tried to find you, Bill continued. March 1943, I wrote to the cafe in Southampton. The letter came back saying the cafe had been destroyed in a bombing, and you were no longer at that address. The cafe was hit in January 1943, Maggie confirmed. I moved in with my mother. I didn't know that. I didn't know where you'd gone. I wrote to the British Red Cross, asked them to help me find you. They said they had thousands of similar requests and couldn't prioritize searching for a girlfriend when they were trying to reunite actual families. Maggie was silent, processing. The address you gave me. Your family's farm. I wrote there. The letter came back undeliverable. Bill closed his eyes. I gave you the rural route address. It was correct. But my family sold the farm in December 1942. They couldn't keep it going alone, and they thought I was going to die. They moved to my uncle's place in Ohio. I didn't know it was sold until I got home. By then, any letters you sent would have been returned, so you gave up, Maggie said. You moved on. You married Carol. You built a life without us. I didn't marry Carol until 1960, Bill said, 18 years later. I searched for you for years, Maggie. I hired private detectives 3 separate times. They couldn't find you because you kept your maiden name. You never married, so there was no marriage record. And I was looking for Margaret Harper in Southampton, but you'd moved to this town. Different county records. Everything was different. I have a daughter, Maggie said suddenly, Elizabeth. She was born November 28, 1942. She's yours. Bill's face went bone white. What? I was pregnant when you left. I found out after you stopped writing. I tried to tell you. I tried to find you, but I couldn't. Bill stood up, his prosthetic leg making the movement awkward. He walked to the window, his back to Maggie. His shoulders were shaking. Carol went to him, placed her hand on his back. They stood like that for a long time. I have a daughter, Bill said, his voice broken. I have a daughter and I never knew. For 45 years I never knew. She hates you, Maggie said. The words came out flat, factual. I made sure of it. I told her you abandoned us. That you were a coward who ran when you found out I was pregnant. I taught her to hate you from the moment she could understand words. Bill turned. Tears were running down his face. Why? Because I hated you, Maggie said simply. Because you promised to come back and you didn't. Because I was alone and scared and angry, and you were the easiest target. Because it hurt less to believe you were bad than to believe I loved you, and fate separated us anyway. You poisoned my daughter against me, Bill said. You made my daughter hate me for something I didn't do. You didn't come back, Maggie said, but there was less conviction in her voice now. I couldn't come back. I didn't know where you were. I searched for you for years, Maggie. Years. I missed you so much it felt like dying. And you were here telling our daughter I was a monster. You were a monster in the only story I had, Maggie shot back. Do you want to know what my life was like? 22 years old, pregnant, unmarried in 1942. I was treated like dirt. People crossed the street to avoid me. Shopkeepers refused to serve me. Men propositioned me because they assumed an unwed mother had no morals. I lost all my friends. I lost job opportunities. I raised Liz alone on a waitress's salary, while everyone whispered about the whore who spread her legs for an American soldier. Her voice was rising now, 45 years of pain pouring out. Yes, I told her you abandoned us, because that's how it felt. You promised forever and you never came back. No letter, no money, no explanation, nothing. What was I supposed to tell her? That her father loved us but couldn't find us? That's somewhere you were searching. I didn't know that. I had no reason to believe it. You could have given me the benefit of the doubt, Bill said. Why? Based on what? Based on 4 months of promises from a soldier shipping out. Do you know how many women got the same promises? How many waited and never heard from their men again? I wasn't special, Bill. I was just another girl left behind. Carol spoke, her voice gentle but firm. Can I say something? Both Maggie and Bill looked at her. I've known Bill for 30 years. I know what losing you did to him. For years he had nightmares about you. He'd wake up crying, convinced you were dead or suffering or had forgotten him. He never forgot you, Maggie. Never. On our wedding day he cried because the bride should have been you, not me. Carol's eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. But Maggie, I understand your anger too. You didn't have the information Bill had. From your perspective, he disappeared. I can't even imagine how hard it was to raise a child alone under those conditions. She looked at both of them. But you both made the same mistake. You both filled in the gaps with the worst possible story. Bill assumed you'd moved on with your life or died. You assumed he'd abandoned you. Neither of you knew the truth because the truth never reached you. The difference, Maggie said quietly, is that I taught that worst possible story to our daughter. I weaponized my pain and gave it to Liz. That's on me. I want to meet her, Bill said. My daughter. I want to meet Elizabeth. She won't want to meet you, Maggie warned. She's believed her whole life that you're worthless. That won't change just because you show up with an explanation. I have to try. She'll hurt you, Maggie said. She's good at it. I taught her how. I don't care. She's my daughter. I missed 45 years because of circumstances neither of us could control. I'm not missing whatever time is left. Maggie picked up the phone. This is going to be bad. She dialed Liz's number. When Liz answered, "He's here," Maggie said. "Your father." In my living room. Silence on the other end. Then, hang up. "Liz, he wants to explain." "I don't care what he wants to explain. He abandoned us. There's no explanation for that. He was wounded. In France. He lost his leg and spent months in the hospital. He tried to find us. How convenient," Liz's voice was acid. 45 years later, he has a sob story. "Did he mention his wife? The woman he married while you were raising his bastard daughter alone?" "Liz, I'm not interested, Mom. Whatever he told you, whatever excuses he came up with, I don't want to hear them. You told me my whole life who he was. Were you lying then, or are you lying now?" The question hit Maggie like a physical blow. I wasn't lying. I just didn't have enough information. "So you made up a story that turned me into someone who hates her own father before I ever had a chance to know him. Great parenting, Mom, really first rate. That's not fair. None of this is fair." Liz was shouting now. "I spent my whole life believing I was unwanted. That my father took one look at the situation and ran. Do you know what that does to a person? How that shapes you?" "I'm sorry," Maggie whispered. "Sorry doesn't fix 45 years of poison," Liz said. Then a pause. "Put him on the phone." Maggie handed the phone to Bill with shaking hands. Bill took it, his face pale. "Elizabeth?" Maggie could hear Liz's voice through the receiver, sharp and cold. "Don't call me Elizabeth. You don't get to use my name like you know me." "Okay, what should I call you?" "Nothing. You shouldn't call me anything because we're not going to have a relationship. I understand you're angry. Do you? Do you really understand? Or are you just saying words you think I want to hear?" Bill's voice was steady despite the tears on his face. "I'm saying words I mean. I understand you're angry. I'd be angry too. I missed every important moment of your life, your growing up, your development, everything. I didn't see you be born, couldn't watch you grow, don't know anything about who you are. And it's killing me. But I want you to know I never abandoned you. I didn't know you existed. Mom says you were wounded. Yes, and that you tried to find us. For years. I never stopped searching. How do I know that's true? How do I know you're not just saying this now to feel better about yourself?" Bill looked at Carol, who pulled a folder from her bag. "I'm going to put your mother back on. We have proof. Letters I wrote that were returned. Private detective reports. Hospital records, everything. We brought copies for you." Maggie took the phone back as Bill and Carol spread documents across the coffee table. Letters in Bill's handwriting, addressed to Margaret Harper in Southampton, stamped "Return to Sender." Private detective reports from 1948, 1953 and 1967, each detailing unsuccessful attempts to locate Margaret Harper. Military hospital records showing Bill's injuries and months-long recovery. It was all real. All documented. It's all proof that Bill's story was true. "She wants to see them," Maggie said, holding the phone. "She's coming on the train tomorrow." Elizabeth arrived the next afternoon. When Maggie opened the door, she found her daughter there, 44 years old, successful, well-dressed, and radiating anger like heat. Bill stood when Liz entered the living room. They looked at each other for the first time. "You have my hair," Bill said softly. "Don't," Liz said. "Don't do the emotional thing. I'm here to see your supposed proof, not to bond." Bill gestured to the coffee table. "It's all there. Take as much time as you need." Liz sat and methodically examined every document. She read each returned letter. She studied every detective report. She reviewed the medical records. It took over an hour. Bill and Maggie sat in silence, waiting. Finally, Liz looked up. "So you're saying all of this was just bad luck? Just missed connections, lost letters, and circumstances beyond your control?" "Yes," Bill said, "and I spent 45 years hating you for nothing." "Not for nothing," Bill said gently. "You had reasons to hate me. They weren't the right reasons. But from your perspective, they were valid. Your mother told the only story she had. She didn't know the truth either. Liz turned to Maggie. You destroyed my relationship with my father before I ever had a chance. You know that, right? I know, Maggie said quietly. Did you ever question your own story? Ever think maybe there's an explanation? No, Maggie admitted. I was too hurt to be curious. It was easier to be angry than to admit I didn't know what happened. Liz stood and walked to the window, her back to all of them. When she spoke, her voice was controlled but trembling. I'm 44 years old. I never married because I never trusted men. I have almost no close relationships because I learned from childhood that people leave. I spent thousands of pounds on therapy to deal with abandonment issues that were apparently based on a lie. She turned. And now you're here with your explanations and your proof, and it's all very tragic and star-crossed. But it doesn't give me back 45 years. It doesn't give me back the person I could have been if my mother hadn't taught me my father was worthless. I know, Bill said. I know I can't fix it. I can't give you back your childhood. I can't take away the pain. But I'm here now, and if you'll let me, I'd like to get to know you. Why? Liz asked. Why now? You lived 69 years without knowing I existed. Why bother now? Because you're my daughter, Bill said simply. Because I missed everything, but I don't want to miss whatever time is left. Because I'm old and I'm dying, heart disease. The doctors say maybe 5 years, and before I go, I want to know who you are. Liz looked at her father. This stranger who shared her DNA, who'd loved her mother once, who'd lived an entire life she knew nothing about. I can't just forgive you, she said, even though it's not your fault. Even though you tried to find us. I can't just flip a switch and suddenly accept you as my father. I don't want that, Bill said. I want a chance. Maybe we have coffee sometime. Maybe we write letters. Turns out I'm good at those. Maybe we just talk occasionally. However you want. What if I say no? What if I say it's too late and I don't want to try? Then I'll respect that, Bill said. It'll break my heart, but I'll respect it. You don't owe me anything, Elizabeth. Not even a chance. Liz was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I need to think about this. This is all too much. Take all the time you need, Bill said. Bill and Carol left that evening. Before they went, Bill gave Maggie a piece of paper with his address and phone number. If she decides to talk to me, she can reach me this way. And Maggie, he paused, I don't blame you. For telling her I abandoned you. You did what you had to do with the information you had. We both did. I blame myself, Maggie said. I should have left room for doubt. Should have taught her that sometimes we don't know the whole story. Instead, I taught certainty where there should have been questions. We all make mistakes when we're hurt and scared, Bill said. How you were doing the best you could. My best wasn't good enough. After they left, Maggie and Liz sat in the living room in silence. He seems nice, Liz said finally. Carol too. Are you going to contact him? I don't know, maybe, in time. Liz looked at her mother. I'm angry at you. You know that, right? Too angry to even think straight. I know. You turned me into someone who can't trust, can't love properly, can't believe in anything good. Because you needed someone to blame and he wasn't here to defend himself. I know, Maggie whispered. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry isn't enough, Liz said. But it's a start. Bill Carter died in March 1992, 5 years after that first meeting, exactly as the doctors predicted. By then, he and Liz had built something fragile but real. They'd exchanged letters every week. She'd visited Pennsylvania twice. They'd talked on the phone every Sunday. It wasn't a traditional father-daughter relationship. There was too much missing, too much hurt. But it was something. Connection, understanding, maybe even love in its own complicated way. At his funeral, Liz gave a speech. She talked about lost time and found connections, about how hatred is easy, but forgiveness is hard, about how sometimes the stories we tell ourselves are wrong, but we don't learn that until it's almost too late. Maggie attended the funeral. Carol had invited her, generous even in grief. Maggie stood in the back, watching her daughter, shaped by pain she'd caused, say goodbye to the father she'd almost completely missed. After the service, Carol approached her. You know he loved you, until the end. His first love. He used to say losing you was the worst wound the war gave him. I loved him too, Maggie said. I just forgot how to remember it without anger. Here's something you need to understand about pain. It demands a target. When terrible things happen and there's no one to blame, we invent someone. We create villains from the victims of circumstance because directing our anger at fate feels futile. Maggie made Bill into a bad person because she needed someone responsible for her pain. And then she gave that story to Liz because pain, like love, is passed down through generations. The tragedy isn't that Bill and Maggie lost each other. That was sad, but it happens. Wars separate people. Letters get lost. Circumstances conspire against even the best intentions. The tragedy is that Maggie's pain became Liz's inheritance. That a 45-year-old woman learned to hate someone she'd never met based on a story with half the pieces missing. Bill got 5 years with his daughter, only 5 after missing 45. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough, but it was something salvaged from the wreckage. Liz told a therapist once, "The worst part isn't that I missed knowing my father. It's that I missed the chance to decide about him for myself. My mother decided for me, and I lived in her truth instead of finding my own." That's the real lesson here. Not about lost letters or missed connections, but about how we tell our pain and how those narratives shape the people we love most, sometimes in ways that hurt them long after our own pain has faded. Maggie died in 1998, 6 years after Bill. At her funeral, Liz found a box in her mother's closet. Inside were all of Bill's letters from 1942, the ones that came before he was wounded. Letters full of love, promises, and plans. Maggie had kept them for 56 years. Proof that once, before everything went wrong, someone had loved her completely. Liz read them and cried. For her mother. For her father. For the family they almost were. For the woman she might have been if she'd grown up knowing that love, instead of learning the hatred. But mostly she cried for all the waste. All that pain passed down through generations like silverware, polished with resentment and served at every family meal. Sometimes there are no villains. Sometimes there's just bad luck and bad timing, and people doing the best they can with incomplete information. And sometimes, by the time you figure that out, it's too late to matter. Yes, we've come to the end of another legendary piece of content that catches us off guard. There are so many lessons we need to take from this story. If we started talking about it, this video would probably last for hours. Why don't we meet in the comments instead? I love you all so much. Stay tuned for our next content. I assure you we'll listen to many more stories together, from which we'll draw lessons and get swept up in waves of emotion. Take care.